Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having me at short notice. It's great to be here. So I am going to talk a little bit about some of the practicalities of how we make this great transition. So Forum for the Future, we are a sustainability not-for-profit, and we work collaboratively with governments, business and NGOs and others to solve tricky challenges, the tricky challenges of sustainability. And we've been doing this for the last 20 years, and we have lots of practical experience of how this happens. So I just want to reflect a little bit on some of that experience, but also where this is going and what we need in order to accelerate the change that we need to see. We work in two particular ways. So we start with leading company transformation, working one-on-one with businesses like Unilever and PepsiCo, helping them to develop really progressive strategies that respond to a lot of the challenges that you've been talking about over the last couple of days. But increasingly, we also use our skills at collaboration and facilitation to bring companies together to work collaboratively on solutions, and I think you're going to be hearing a lot about that sort of thing throughout today. So that's Forum. We have a network, much like many others, and we have offices in Singapore, Mumbai, London, and New York. So here we have a familiar set of trends. And I'm sure that you have been talking about these over the last half day. You're very familiar with the crisis and urgency that is needed here. At Forum for the Future, we spend a lot of time looking at future trends and how we might respond. And as well as these trends that are creating crisis and change and shaping a different business context, we also look for positive change that we can harness to actually capture the opportunity in the future. So by the end of this year, there'll be more mobile phones than people. Is that a great business opportunity? That sort of level of change in terms of digital enabling connectedness, what can we do with that? Does that enable greater transparency? So something like SkyTruth, which is an NGO that uses satellite technology and GPS to take visual aerial pictures of deforestation and pollution incidents. Does that enable much greater accountability for companies? Obviously, it presents risks, but it presents opportunities. I could go on to augmented reality, and there are tiny little mosquito-sized drones that are now flying around monitoring pollution levels, all sorts of things. But rather than actually focus on those trends today, I want to talk a little bit about how do we shift them, how do we respond to them and capture the opportunity that they present. So we see that businesses need to respond in two ways. I mean, first of all, you obviously have to get the basics right. Reporting, having a solid sustainability strategy, all of that side of things. But there are two ways that the leaders and progressive companies are really taking this agenda forward. The first is about innovating to win. So innovation is where you really start to capture the business opportunity. That might be new products and services. It might be products and services that are particularly focused on solving sustainability challenges, all of the things that we are talking about. So from water-free shampoo right through to the Forest Stewardship Council standard, those sorts of things are the products of the future that are going to be successful. At the same time, though, it's really important that every single piece of innovation is going in a more sustainable direction. And I think right now we see a lot of product and service innovation not necessarily having any sort of sense of direction. We do some work with Interface Floor, who are very famous for their sustainability thinking, and they have a matrix which rates all of their products on 1 to 5, 5 being very sustainable, 1 being not very sustainable, or it might be the other way around, I can't actually remember. But everyone has to move from 1 to 2 to 3 in every iteration of a product, and that's a really important consideration on an incremental level. So that's innovating to win. But the second part is about shaping the context. And throughout the day, you'll see companies who are engaging in the round table on sustainable palm oil or other things like that, which is about looking to influence their supply chain, looking to actually shape customer demand. It's no good innovating great sustainable products if no one wants to buy them. It's no good having a brilliant product take-back system if nobody actually brings back their products so that you can recycle them. And that goes much broader than that. It's about shaping the context so that capital markets reward performance. It's about signing up to the right sort of standards, a whole range of things. And this shaping the context is that combined activity that is going to create the change that we need. And there's a business benefit of doing that, not just around economies of scale and sort of the benefits of differentiation, but also cost savings through collaborating, reducing risk by sharing that with your competitors and throughout your supply chain. So, thinking about this and actually taking on this transformation needs a different kind of approach. It needs us to be much more systematic about how we think about creating change. And that's why Forum for the Future has their 6 steps to significant change. My background is actually in change management and system transformation. And we think that this isn't applied enough to sustainability challenges. So actually properly thinking through, how does change happen? What are the classic characteristics of change? And how can we be using them more effectively to create this transformation or this revolution, as Magnus talked about this morning? So you start at the bottom of the curve with experiencing the need for change, people understanding what they need to do. So if you take something like the Marine Stewardship Council, which is the MSC label, which is a label that goes on to fish and assures you that it's been produced responsibly. Experiencing the need for change would have been about understanding where overfishing was happening and that a number of fish stocks were reaching crisis point. You then get into diagnosing the system. So for fishing, for the MSC, that was about Unilever and WWF and others coming together and seeing the consumer as a key pinch point and actually engaging the consumer and being transparent with the consumer, enabling different decisions to be made and therefore changing the nature of the supply chain. You move into pioneering practice. In this case, it was a standard. Quite often it can be a product and service. It can be a whole range of different activities that you start to pilot and test. And the ones that are successful, you then look to scale. And it's not until you get to sort of stage 4 and you've actually got some proven activity that you start to move into the mainstream. And from there, you need to sustain the transition and set the new rules of the mainstream. And it's at the top of the curve where you often get regulatory intervention when things have been proven and you actually need that sustained transition. So we are applying that thinking to lots of our work, and in particular we focus on stages 2 to 4 because that's where the real shift happens, the real profound change happens, and we call that system innovation because we're applying it at a system level. But this S-curve works very much when you're looking at company transformation too. And if we're going to get to the level of transformation that we need to be rigorously thinking through the changes that we make. We need to be experimenting, creating pioneering practice, expecting some to fail, looking to scale the ones that don't, because we need that scale and we need it urgently. A couple of examples. I chair the Sustainable Shipping Initiative. This is a vertical cut of the shipping supply chain. Essentially, shipping accounts for 3 to 4% of global CO2 emissions, and that was looking like it was going to triple by 2050 if intervention wasn't taken. So leaders in the shipping industry recognised that it was really important to respond to that, but also respond on a social and human level as well. So shipping being a provider of many jobs and interacting with local communities. So we brought together the whole supply chain, from the shipyards through to the ship operators, owners, right through to shipping customers like Unilever and AkzoNobel. And they've worked together to create a vision for what they want to achieve, collaboration being a key part of creating this sustainable future, and then diagnose what needed to happen. So one of the things that they had diagnosed was this whole area of split incentives. So your owner doesn't necessarily have an incentive to invest in energy efficient technology on a ship, because it's the charterer who benefits, because they pay for the fuel. So looking at so they've developed a new financial model that actually addresses that split incentive. So from vision right through to practical action, but importantly, these leading companies looking to shape their context. But it works on a company level too, and I imagine that you may have heard a little bit about Puma over the last day, so I thought I'd rebalance things by talking about Nike. So 60% of, so Nike have a really clear strategy about evolving their innovation strategy. So they see, they've made a lot of decisions about where they're pre-competitive and where they need to be competitive. So they compete on innovating their products and services. So you may be familiar with the Flyknit shoe or the Fuel Band. So the Flyknit shoe is a woven shoe, so you build it from the bottom up, so it's much more efficient in terms of use of materials, much more recyclable and deconstructible. That's where they want to compete, but they also see the need to collaborate on key challenges. So they're working with some specialist technology providers on how do you get waterless dyeing. So that's where they want to collaborate, but they keep that sort of level of collaboration relatively bounded. And then they move into system innovation, which is about how do you influence the wider system and influence up and down the supply chain. So for something like materials, which is a really important system for Nike, 60% of the environmental footprint of trainers are embedded in the materials that they use. And so what they've done is they've got a three-stage approach. First of all, they said, right, okay, we need to understand what are the impacts of our materials. And so they came up with Nike Sustainability Index, which was looking at tracking the various impacts of materials. And then they made that open source through a federated wiki so that others could engage with that and different material suppliers could use it. And it's now translated into the Higgs Index, which is used by the Sustainable Apparel Coalition across the industry. But they realized that actually just by having a standard wasn't enough if nobody used it. So they also developed something called the Makers app, which is a very simplified form of this index that can be used primarily by designers. It looks great, designers really like using it, it's very simple to use, and gives you a kind of immediate assessment of the sustainability of your materials so that people can actually start to make smarter choices. And so that's kind of dealing with the current supply chain. But finally, in their strategy for materials, they also recognized that there weren't enough sustainable materials coming through for them to use, and they wanted to promote more of that. So they have an initiative called Launch, which is a partnership with NASA and USAID and the US State Department, looking at where are future materials coming from? How can we drive real innovation, encourage small-scale entrepreneurs and designers to be coming up with new solutions? They kicked this off last April with an event where they got the whole materials supply chain into the room, so the whole material system into the room, and took them through a process of kind of understanding, experiencing the need for change, and starting to diagnose the system. They use a lot of system mapping, that sort of thing. But this is primarily about actually getting people to apply to an innovation fund that they then promote and sort of move forward. So the future of materials is also, they are also taking responsibility for the future of materials. So there's a couple of examples. Essentially, at Forum for the Future, we think that we can apply much more sophisticated change thinking and systems thinking to the sustainability challenges to create this great transformation, to respond to the urgency and actually get scale. There's a lot of innovation and solutions out there, but we need them to be much more widely adopted. To do that, we need to innovate and we need to collaborate. And individual efforts will only take us so far. We need to work together. We call this the big shift because it's about adding up lots of different incremental innovations as well as having disruptive, more radical innovations. And we are very keen for all of you to engage with that too. So if we're going to get to that great transformation, we need to innovate and to collaborate, and that's the route to a successful and sustainable future. Thank you.